Hello, everybody. Jimmy here of Wine with Jimmy, and thank you for clicking by. So, welcome to a video here where we're going to look at the rather immersive side of the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. So, this is a video around the diploma, so the level 4, and this is on the D3 section, which they call the Beast, as it is quite a significant amount of information to absorb, understand, and then to put into examination. So I'm going to go through examination technique. This is a wonderful new series that I'm looking at to help you understand the questions that may come up, understand the specific wording of those questions, how to allocate your time, and how to give a model answer. So here on this one, I'm going to be talking about Chardonnay in this video, so I'll go through that very shortly. But here you'll see the benefits of this video. Now, as you know, I like this to be as interactive as it possibly can be, and the way to do that is by getting in touch via the comments below. Please pose your questions and comments. Please let me know. Certainly, if you have come across this question before, maybe you had it in an examination format, and how you would add to it. It's always good to collaborate. Now, this video is very useful. I'm going to give you the questions very shortly, but then you can pause it, of course, write your model answer, or rather write your answer, and then you can test it against the model answer that I will run through. You'll also gain a knowledge in understanding timings of each of the sections and where you should allocate your time accordingly. Also, very importantly, is that WSET is a British organisation using these command verbs, which in some cultures might not be necessarily as second nature to you. So there are some certainly helpful hints and tips around command verbs that I'll go through in this video. Also, I'm going to go through the nuts and bolts, the real kind of context behind the question. So what key points you should be putting in. I'm not going to write in terms of prose and answer here for you, but certainly put down key points to help you really with how you're structuring your answer and what to put in there. And then afterwards, I'm going to reflect on the answer by using the very important notes from examiners, which is available from WSET. So this is the in-depth notes from the examiners, really around specifically about what not to do in the answer, but some hints and tips certainly about what to include as well. Okay, so let's have a look at our question on Chardonnay. So here is your overview of the question. And WSET like to structure it with what we call the weighting. So you'll see in brackets after each sentence here, you'll see 20% weighting, 30% weighting, and 50% weighting. Of course, this is all adding up to 100%, but gives you an idea of really those number in terms of what your time should be allocated. Let's have a look at the question. So briefly outline the characteristics of the Chardonnay vine, just for 20% of the marks. Compare for the grape growing environments of Chablis and the Russian River Valley for 30%. Describe the techniques winemakers use in these two regions to enhance the aromas and textures of their Chardonnay wines. That's the big lion's share of 50%. Now, please, this is where you are going to pause this very shortly. Just before you do, I'm going to talk about timings here. So in the examinations for the D3, there are two papers. In the first one, it's 120 minutes to answer paper 1, and that's where you answer 3 out of 4 questions. In paper 2, it's 80 minutes where you answer 2 out of 3 questions. Now, when you figure that out in terms of your timings, which is important here, I think the best format here is that to give yourself 5 minutes really per question in order to read all the questions to begin with, but then to decide which ones to do and then to begin planning. So I do 5 minutes to begin with, then 35 minutes per question. So this is just one question we're looking at here. So this is going to be a total of 40 minutes, but 35 minutes per question, which I would split into 5 minutes planning your answer and 35 minutes writing your answer. And then there may be a little bit of time afterwards to, of course, recap and just to sort of dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were. Okay, so if you are planning to then have a go at this at home, then this is a time to pause this before I go through the examination answers. So please press pause, have a go in a total of about 40 minutes, okay? 5 minutes planning your answer, and then the 35 minutes writing your answer. Okay, so let's talk about the question itself into those 3 parts. First up, you will see we're going to talk firstly about the main command verb that we find within the question, because it's important if giving you direction of what you should be writing in this answer. So it says briefly, very key word as well, because it means, of course, not much. Briefly outline the characteristics of the Chardonnay vine. So what does this word outline mean? And I've put some key English literature wording below there in a box to give you an idea. So outline is providing a brief summary of the key points. Okay, so this is not in depth. You are not indulging the answer. It's a brief summary. Sticking to the essentials. You don't need to explain or describe or justify. It's outlining, really almost kind of like listing, but you will be writing in sentences. And there are some example phrases there on the right hand side. So main features include, see how generalized you are being, typically involves, ... typically being used commonly in order to sort of say the generalization, again, the typicity of the area. Okay, so that gives you an idea. It's in this answer about being fairly succinct, being quite to the point. The second question is compare the grape growing environments of Chablis and the Russian River Valley. You'll see in the box below, compare or contrast. Now this is highlighting both similarities and or differences. So you need to be aware that it's not just comparing that one will be opposite to the other. Okay, so you can have that sort of synonym relationship, but we're more also looking at opposites, the antonym side of things. So we're looking at both of those. You need to be aware that a key wine region compared to another might have a similar soil, might have a similar climatic, but it could have different weather, for example. It's important here to be structured. So make sure that you have a clear way of working through this, going through how pretty much the WSET textbook is commonly established. So yes, it will go through things like location and history, but then really the grape growing environment is where you are mentioning, of course, things like climate, weather, soils, grape varieties, okay, and flowing through that process. Okay, and key phrases, while both might have this kind of conditions, region X only has, and region Y is very different, in contrast to, comparing to, whereas. These are what we call bridge phrases that are able to connect your sentences. And then finally, the third part here is describe the techniques winemakers use in these two regions to enhance the aromas and textures of their Chardonnay wines, the big one. And you'll see here, describe is giving factual details about the characteristics, features, or the steps. So here we are giving factual details about the techniques the winemakers will use. And this is at diploma knowledge, please. So you're going to be going through the type of yeast you use, the temperature of ferments. You're going to be going through the vessel You're going to look at oxidation or protection, reductive means, and so on and so on. Okay, so examples there: the wine is aged in, the climate is, this grape produces wines with. But remember, please aim it at that diploma level. So we're going to go back to that first one, briefly outline the characteristics of the Chardonnay vine. This is actually the most achievable part if you have good knowledge, of course, of a Chardonnay vine. So here is the list that you can apply this from. And as you can see, I'm giving you a list, but please you'd write this in prose. So Chardonnay is early budding. It is early ripening. Okay. We don't need to go into the details, okay? It's sticking to the essentials. It's clonally diverse. It's an old school grape variety which has been grown in multiple locations, still is today, and has adapted to a multiple amount of climates, therefore creating quite a distinct amount of clonal diversity. It's adaptable. It does grow in cool to hot climates and different types of macroclimates. It's easy to grow, hence why it's a major grape variety of commerciability, and it's productive. But it is really capable of producing high quality grapes for premium wine. We know some of the world's most finest wines, be it from the Côte d'Or, Chablis, Champagne, or something like Sonoma, Russian River, or even places like Argentina, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, England. They can all produce high quality premium Chardonnay wine. Also, Chardonnay can be used for grapes to be made into a base wine for production of sparkling wines such as champagne. But it does have some issues as a vine. Yes, it's adaptable, easy to grow and productive, but it can be prone in places with high weather issues around things like grey rot, powdery mildew, millerand d'ange, and grapevine yellows. Okay, now I need to stress the timing of this. It's very, very important. You will, at 20% of the question, you will be looking at about 7 minutes only to write your answer here. So yes, some of you might sort of say, well, what about this with Chardonnay? What about this? It's all about timing, whether you feel you can put that in the 7 minutes in a very well-structured manner. Okay, I've given you 6 points there, and that's going to be talking about each of those, therefore, in around a minute, just over a minute. So it could be quite difficult when you're writing that out. Now, I want to throw in what WSET say, the notes from the examiners, widely available, this and downloadable. Very useful to use this in hindsight, very useful to use this in reference to what you may have written. And as you can see here, the Chardonnay vine, that's what they're asking here, should have steered the candidates away from writing about the final wine. So not about its style, not about the oakiness and so on. And as they've mentioned here, people did write about its affinity to oak, which is winemaking, the winemaking options for Chardonnay, and then how it tastes different with citric fruits and apple in cool climates and peach. None of that is relevant to this answer. But they do mention that this is one of the most easier parts of this question. So most relevant points, early ripening, and all the ones I've mentioned earlier are relevant here. But this was one of the reasons why many candidates wrote far more for this first 50%, which is this question and the next one, than they did for the second 60%, which is on the winemaking side of it. And that's where timing is essential. Remember, 7 minutes is really what you should be spending on this first part of this question.